Good evening and welcome to tonight's presentation on the subject of living well with PKD. Joining us tonight, you'll see myself, hopefully a familiar face to many of you now. I'm Susan Muirhead, the Support Services Manager for the PKD charity, and I'm joined tonight by our CEO, Tess, who usually would be doing the introduction, but she's doing remote control behind the scenes tonight for me. Thank you, Tess. We also have Louise Hankinson, a clinical psychologist, and Rachel Williams, a psychotherapist. And it's Louise and Rachel who you'll be most interested in hearing talk tonight. They'll be discussing the workshops that they'll be holding, and it's Louise and Rachel that will be leading these activities. Most of you know about the PKD charity now. We were founded in the year 2000. We offer support and advocacy, and we're also keen to promote research, including the funding of biobanks, etc. For anyone tonight, perhaps there's something that has triggered a thought in your mind and you'd like to chat now instead of waiting till a later date. Our helpline is open Monday to Friday, and the number's displayed in the bottom corner. Usually when you call, you'll get myself or Tess, but if we are in a meeting perhaps, or you phoned out of hours, you will go to a voicemail, and we do ask that you leave a message and we'll always come back to you. There's nothing worse when we can see a missed call, but we don't know who you are to come back to you. Now, most of us, I think, in the last 18 months have learned to work Zoom, but for some of us, doing something like this is a bit new. Just so you all know, you're in the audience, no one can see you tonight. So it's fine if you're up and about eating dinner, making a cuppa, that's okay. But how would you ask your questions to us this evening? On the bottom of your screen, depending on what device you'll do, you'll see a Q&A with two little speech bubbles above it. If you click there, you would be able to pop in any questions you have for Louise or Rachel. They'll either come round as the subject arises, or they'll take questions and answers also at the end of tonight's call. For those of you, perhaps you're looking and saying, oh, what's chat about? If you have any problems, perhaps you can't hear us so well, or a connection, use the chat facility. Now tonight, we will have a few links for you. We'll pop them into the chat for you. Don't be too anxious that you've got to run and get a pen and paper to write down anything that gets popped in there. You can open it in your browser. If you click a link, it's like when we're on a web page, it'll open another page for you. And when we close our meeting, it's still open for you. So details of how to book any of the workshops will be there. We always like to thank the National Lottery for the community funding we receive, which has actually made this project possible. So I'll hand you over just now to Louise and Rachel. Good evening, Louise. Good evening, Rachel.
Hi. Hello, Susan. Thank you very much. Right, so I'm now going to attempt to share my screen. So I think you need to unshare. There we go, brilliant. And I'm going to attempt to share. And oh, hang on a minute. There we go. Okay, so thank you so much for inviting us to do this and to introduce the workshops this evening to you all. So it's a series of 4 workshops for people living with PKD and their families. But I'll start with a brief introduction so that you know who myself and Rachel are. So as Susan said, my name is Louise and I'm a clinical psychologist. I work in Oxford in the renal and transplant unit there. And so I do have quite a lot of experience of working with people with PKD. I also do some work with Rachel. This is what we do when I'm not working for the NHS. It's called In Two Minds, and we run workshops and training events in education and in healthcare settings. Over to Rachel.
Wonderful. And for those of you who haven't guessed, which you probably haven't, we are sisters. And I am a psychotherapist, and I have been working for the last 18 years with adolescents and with adults who suffer with their mental health, trying to help them relate more skillfully to the thoughts and feelings that show up as a natural part of being human. Can you hear? Can't hear Rachel well. I don't know why. I'm going to try and increase my voice a little bit, and hopefully that will make a difference. I work one-on-one with individuals, and I also work in groups and in whole business and school communities. And I also work for Ocumel, which is the Ocular Melanoma charity, running workshops to help people who are struggling with their diagnosis and their aftercare.
Okay. So a very brief overview of the workshops and what we have in mind in running this with the PKD charity is that we really wanted these workshops to operate more as a guided conversation, and that Rachel and I will facilitate these conversations. So rather than it being a kind of death by PowerPoint, which hopefully this isn't going to be this evening, but you know, just sort of being talked at, which can be really helpful, and there's lots of well-being stuff out there that runs along those lines, it would be much more interactive. So we may well share some teaching with you with a few slides, but the focus will really be on a dialogue. That's why we're keeping the numbers small, so that everyone will get an opportunity to speak up, and hopefully we'll also have an opportunity to share some practical tools and strategies where these are appropriate. We really want to evaluate these workshops so that the charity and Rachel and I can learn from this experience. So at the end of it, you'll all be invited, as with this evening, to complete a brief feedback form. You can attend a maximum of 2 each, just to make sure that we reach as wide a population as possible. This information, I'm sure, is on the PKD charity website, but the dates, this is an overview of when they are, so please don't feel like you've got to scribble all of this down, but they'll be running on Wednesday evenings from 7 till 8:30, and we'll be running one, that was my dog, sorry if you could hear that, we'll be running one on pain, anxiety, relationships, and diagnosis. And they will all be on Zoom, which is why you've got a strange picture on the side of a bunch of people on a Zoom call. So let's give you a brief overview now of each of these, so you have a bit more of an idea about where we see each of these workshops going. So I'm going to introduce the pain one, then Rachel will talk to you about anxiety, I'll talk about relationships, and Rachel will touch on diagnosis. If you do have questions as we go through this, great. If not, there'll be time at the end for some questions and answers then. So pain, I worked in a pain clinic for many years and have lots of experience of working with chronic pain. And with PKD, there is a lot of pain. There is, I think you say this on your website, but there's a difference between acute pain, which is also very present in PKD, and we associate that more for all of you with things like bursting cysts and perhaps so acute pain is pain that's sort of there, it's very, very painful, and then it passes. Okay, so it's shorter lived, very painful, but it passes. Chronic pain is pain that perhaps goes on for, I think they say about 3 months. Pain that is not responding to treatment, and it's just sort of ongoing. And this would be more the sort of pain, in my experience, and I hope to learn from you as much as maybe you will learn from Rachel and I, the pain that comes from the discomfort of having very enlarged organs and the pressure and the pain that this brings as it presses on other parts of your body. So what we'll be doing in these workshops is, I know from my experience, and all the research tells me, that isolation is a major problem when you're living with pain. So one of the most important things in this workshop will be an opportunity to share your experience of living with pain, what works and what doesn't work, and also just to know that you're not on your own. There will be a short presentation because I'd really love to share with everybody some of the key concepts and theories around mindfulness and acceptance-based approaches to living with pain. So obviously these are psychological approaches to pain. And sometimes when people hear that you're going to have some psychological therapy for pain, people can get a bit stressed because they feel like, oh, they think it's all in my head. And this is a really normal reaction, but I don't think it's all in your head. Okay, your pain is real. But what comes with pain is often a resistance and a dislike of pain, right? And we want to get rid of it. And sometimes we find successful solutions to help us eliminate our pain, and sometimes those things don't work. And sometimes the things that we do to try to get rid of our pain then become problems in themselves. So when we're talking about psychological approaches, it's very often about finding ways to live with our pain. I really want this workshop to be very interactive, so there will be an opportunity to practice some of these approaches during the session and reflect together on what shows up when we do this and how we're feeling about that. So that's an overview of the pain workshop. So now over to you, Rachel, to talk about emotions.
How's my volume?
Still quiet.
Is it quiet? Okay, I will try and limit this then and say a little bit less than I would do normally, which I'm sure you're all delighted about. In terms of anxiety, as Louise said, I would really like us to use this workshop as an opportunity for us to share our experiences of how it feels to sit with uncertainty. Anxiety is a normal and natural part of being human, but it can actually hijack our attention, and it can often sabotage our attempts to actually move towards the things that really matter to us. So we can't, in the same way as Louise was saying about pain, we can't eliminate anxiety, but we can learn sometimes new ways that we can relate to our anxiety, and to understand that anxiety is a set of physical sensations, and to try and bring some curiosity to those physical sensations, to try and understand what these emotions, anxiety as being one of them, is actually telling you about the way that you're living your life. So in terms from an evolutionary point of view, obviously fight, flight and freeze was an incredibly efficient way for people to avoid external sources of threat. But of course, we now know that the biggest trigger for us in a very safe 2021, minus COVID, is often an internal event, such as a thought or an emotion showing up. So in other words, we want to look and explore different ways of responding to these emotional events, this energy in motion, these emotions that are trying to get us to do something different. And those practical exercises that we want to cover, if people are interested, is to look at the ways in which we can actually tap into our breath and to use it in a restorative way to help us calm our bodies, to enable our minds to do what our minds are there for, which is to help us make wise choices about where we choose to put our energy. So those practical exercises are around curiosity and also about learning how to calm our bodies, to free up our minds. And that's what I hope that we can cover experientially, in particularly, and practically. And hopefully you might leave with one or two new short practices that will enable you to maybe relate to anxiety in a slightly different way.
Thank you. Okay, are there any questions showing up, or should I just push on?
I think there's one. Oh, here we go. Do you want, can you read the question, Lou?
No.
Should we do that at the end?
Okay, we'll do it at the end.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so the next, for some reason now it's not letting me, there we go. So relationships. One thing that's come out of the conversations between us and the charity is that this felt like a very important theme and a very important topic, and it is a vast theme and a vast topic. So we're not likely to be able to cover everything, but just to acknowledge, I see this in my work all the time, the impact of illness and the impact of PKD on our relationships. And this isn't just a relationships with others, it's also our relationship with ourselves. That when we become unwell, or when we find out that we are that we have PKD, then it affects our sense of who we are. and we all have very strong stories about who we are. So Rachel and I are sisters, and there are strong stories within our family about us as sisters. And I know that if one of us got unwell, it would alter that relationship and that dynamic. And one of us may be seen as the clever one or the strong one, or the, we all have these stories about ourselves in families, don't we? Or I'm the one that helps others. And then if you're suddenly put in a position where that power dynamic shifts, or you're in a position where you're needing help and you're more comfortable in the being the giver of help, then that can obviously have a profound impact in lots of ways. So we want to explore the impact of a PKD diagnosis on these relationships, and the challenges that this brings to having conversations and to sharing things within families, and also within workplace and friendship situations. It can, some of the conversations that I hear my patients having to have, they're profoundly difficult. And we want to acknowledge that in the workshop, hear from people about what some of those challenges are, and for Rachel and I to offer advice and guidance around having difficult conversations. One of the other things that's really come up in thinking about this workshop is things like intimacy. And this is something that I think a lot of my patients don't necessarily feel, that they don't bring it up very often. And I should probably get better at inviting conversations about this sort of thing, because PKD doesn't just have an impact on our identity and relationships in those ways. It also can affect our physical relationships with people, our self-confidence, our body image. And of course, if we're feeling that we don't want to share our bodies, then that's going to affect our relationships and those sorts of things. So we have thought about, we really hope to create a space where we can invite conversations around those sorts of issues, but obviously we're not going to impose them on everyone. And there's always an opportunity to have some breakout rooms where perhaps one of us can take a group that do want to talk about those things, and the other ones can talk about other things. So we'll be as flexible as we can. And perhaps we can talk to you before the workshop to sort of find out what sort of things people want to touch on. So that's the relationships workshop. And now Rachel's going to talk about diagnosis.
I'm aware that my volume is still not great, so I'm going to try and project even harder and say less. As it says on this slide, a diagnosis may come out of the blue, or you may see it coming. I think an exploration of the fear that accompanies sitting with the uncertainty that a diagnosis brings. And with a diagnosis will, of course, come a wandering mind that will start to project and to forecast a future that will be different than before you had your diagnosis. And I think exploring how we can bring our attention back to those sort of shared facts and shared experiences that we hope this workshop will enable you to connect with others on. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of that kind of common humanity element of self-compassion, which is recognizing that very often with a diagnosis we can feel very shrink-wrapped in our own world. And actually what we know is that if we can unfold, share our experiences and our fears and our uncertainties with others, that can go some way to enabling us to feel less alone in our experience. And also, of course, the diagnosis will be for some traumatic, not just for the individual that's had the diagnosis, but also for other family members as well. And I think it's appreciating that in a moment of a diagnosis, that actually self-care and self-compassion become even more important than ever. And maybe we could spend some time on this workshop thinking about self-compassion and self-care at a time of a difficult diagnosis, but also looking at ways in which we can collaborate as a group, as well as you yourselves collaborating with other family members to make wise shared decisions around treatment, etc., moving forward. Is that okay? I can see we've got something in the chat, but I don't. I think we do a whole workshop on body image. I'll just read this one out. Someone's giving me some direction on projecting here. I should have read that early. So I'll try and shift to the left or to the right. Thank you for the feedback. Someone's put here, I think you could do a whole workshop on body image. How many of us women with large abdomens have been asked if we are pregnant? Just awful. And we will, yes, bear that in mind, because of course our self-concept is just as important as our sort of identity. So thank you very much for that. That's a very valid point.
Just while we're waiting, and another couple of questions coming onto the screen there. For so many of us, how will the conversations work if we were to join the workshop? What would we expect? Is it a simple presentation, then whatever the conversation would lead within that topic from those that are in the workshop?
We'll always start with some ground rules. So these will be mutually agreed. Obviously, we can put a list of ground rules up, but it's generally better if everyone just comes up with them around confidentiality. Some of you may know each other in a workshop, some of you won't, and it's really important that we keep everything within the workshop confidential. I don't think there will be a set formula. Like if I said, oh, we'll do some teaching first, it may be that actually we end up having more of a discussion first, and then we'll say, now I'm going to do some teaching. But I would envisage that there will be an opportunity for everyone to introduce themselves, to talk around something around the topic of the workshop from a personal perspective. There'll be some teaching from us, but not, like I said, the emphasis won't be so much on slides and presentations. And we really want to include experiential exercises wherever possible. So you'd think something like Rachel was just saying around diagnosis, that, you know, how can you have an experiential exercise for that? But it is around self-compassion and how we can sort of look after ourselves in these difficult moments. So we would hope that there will be a bit of teaching, a bit of experiential, lots of sharing, and Rachel and I will guide the sort of conversations and make sure that, you know, everyone gets an opportunity to speak, but that you don't have to speak. But obviously, if you're coming on the workshop, people will generally get more if they are active participants. So not too structured, but yeah, everything, they should all include a bit of everything.
And do remember that there may well be some of these practices or facts that we can share. We can share after the event too, if people are interested in that. And what I've learned from running the Ocumel workshops is that actually, as Louise said, a guided conversation is the best way of describing them, because nothing that we say is going to be as helpful as the courage that you show in bringing your own experience to these groups. And I think, you know, our role is to kind of facilitate that conversation, but it may well be as a consequence of that, that there are some resources that you would really like some more guidance on. And Louise and I are pretty good at sharing those resources afterwards for those of you that may wish to maybe delve into a subject a bit more. But we really want them to be guided conversations, but there will be some structure to it. And I hope that people can join us in those very important experiential exercises that bring a real felt sense to what it is that we'll be sharing. Now, maybe this is a question for Susan. In terms of confidentiality, we've been asked, will they be recorded?
No, on this occasion, due to confidentiality, it's an open workshop, and for everyone to get the best out of it, you want it to be private. Tonight's is recorded, so we can use this to encourage others to sign up who are perhaps unable to join tonight, so they can find out what this is about. So tonight's webinar is recorded, but the workshops are your personal space. They're for you alone and not for the wider world.
No, okay, thank you for that.
And I noticed there's a question just come in the question answer from someone who was previously diagnosed, and they have been told that they'll be due to start dialysis in the near future, and they're worried about it. Is there a place they can discuss this with others? So obviously the subject they're worried and they want to discuss with others. We have a lovely Facebook support group, which is closed, it's members only, which they may wish to join. I'll pop a little personal message over to the person with the details of that group. Also, just coming along perhaps to the anxiety workshop. Depends on the timing, if it's before or after you start there for your dialysis, but certainly it'd be a good place. Have you any quick tips on what this person should be doing to us now?
Rachel, do you want to go?
I can't see the thing that they've shared, what they're experiencing, sorry.
So sorry, this is about a question about being told that they'll need to start dialysis quite soon and they're starting to feel anxious about that. Is that right, Susan?
Yes,
so
they
any
are.
Quick tips?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess a quick tip would be to practice calming your body would be my tip for that, and the way in which I would do that, and I know that that this is something that you want to do quickly, but when we tap into our breath correctly and in a restorative way, then the impact is immediate. So there are a couple of incredible breathing apps that are free. And there are also some wonderful YouTube videos of 3 or 4 minutes introducing ways of breathing in which we can activate our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest system. And that is a really useful way, because if we can learn how to tap into our breath, then we always have that anchor available to us when we notice that our body is beginning to experience some of those very familiar sensations that accompany anxiety and panic in particular. So noticing when your mind has wandered and bringing your attention back to your breath, that is always a very safe and predictable anchor. And it's something that we can tap into at any point, and it's free, which is wonderful. Or if not, and this is going to sound very silly, a pot of bubbles will do a really good job, because of course when you blow bubbles you're actually stimulating not only your vagus nerve, but you're also doing pretty much what the YouTube videos will tell you to do, which is learn to breathe in through your nose and out through pursed lips, and to make your out breath longer than your in breath. The science on this is pretty damn out there already for all of us to access. So does that help a tiny bit?
Rachel, if nothing else, the thought of blowing bubbles has made me smile. Yeah, another.
And also just to really normalise that if you're feeling anxious about starting dialysis, that's because it's scary and because it's new and your body's reacting in all the ways that it should be. Obviously, if it's prolonged and it stays there forever, that's not good. But trying to allow, and to understand and to offer that understanding and access that Facebook group, because you'll find there's lots of other people. You're not alone.
And someone else is asking tonight, can partners join too? As many in the community know, I'm a PKD wife and mother. So yes, join in whatever's appropriate for you. You will be made most welcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Someone's asking quickly about any breathing apps that you can recommend. Now, I know that's putting you on the spot. What I'll do is there will be a follow-up email sent to everyone that's joined us. So if you want to send me any suggestions for apps, we can send them out in an email to people.
Susan, I will do that. I will send you 3 suggestions for free apps that people can put on their phone to help them, as Louise said, normalise their experience, but also try and calm the intensity of the physical sensations that accompany this very real emotion. So yeah, I will do that, Susan. I will email those over.
That's superb. And I think the final one there is people are lots of anxiety comments coming through about panic attacks and things, especially for many that have got worse during lockdown. So definitely I think we could have a popular workshop there. And someone else is asking about the signing up and when they are. So I'm going to potentially crash the PKD website, I'm about to just pop into the chat for anyone where they will find the link.
Sorry, I stopped screen sharing there because I thought you might put up that website picture, but yeah.
Yeah. So the link there takes you to the PKD charity website. If you look under support and scroll to the bottom section, you'll find Living Well with PKD workshops. Now there is limited spaces, so we are asking you to select your favourite 2 of the 4 courses that are available. Sign up for the 2. If we are out of space, there will be a waiting list, and subject to demand and availability, we will try and run it again, or perhaps if someone drops out due to other commitments, places will become available as well. So we can certainly do that for you. And just if you want to hold on, if you're not too sure, I will try and screen share that final slide just so you know you're in the right place. But I think a few of you might just be jumping off and going straight over to that website. Now you will see there, just if you haven't managed to jot that down or open it in a new tab, that is the section of the website you'll be looking for. You'll arrive on our home page. You'll see the green and purple banner. Go to support, down to the bottom, and you'll see I've circled it in red, Living Well with PKD workshops. On that page, you will see a brief description of each workshop, the date it's being held, and below it also a direct link to book for that one workshop. So if you're wanting to book for 2, you'll have to go through the process twice. If you click, if it's pain, click on the pain one and book for that. If it's anxiety or relationships, book those, and that's you. As always, if anyone's any questions, you'll get us in our support helpline. The number's actually in the corner of the screen at the moment, or you can get us at info@pkdcharity.org.uk. So I think that is us for the evening. We've ran to time. Thank you both to Louise and Rachel and Tess.
Thank you.
Behind the scenes there, much appreciated. Tess, you want to just close?
No, just to thank Louise and Rachel for helping us with this. This is a new programme, and if it's successful, we will run it again, so you won't miss the opportunity. And also Louise and Rachel have offered to help us with some takeaway materials that will be hopefully helpful for those who can't attend. But yeah, we're really looking forward to this, and fantastically grateful to have such fabulous resources available to us. Yeah, thank you both.